I'm Ernestine, 28 years old, sitting in the bank manager's office, staring at documents that confirm my worst fears. My parents emptied my $250,000 trust fund to spoil my sister Ashley. Their faces, when I confronted them, pure smugness. They never thought I would fight back. They never expected the bank manager would call with news that would wipe those smug smiles right off their faces and replace them with pure panic. Let me know where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button if you've ever been underestimated by family. Trust me, you'll want to see how justice was finally served in this family nightmare. My childhood looked perfect from the outside. We lived in an affluent Boston suburb in a colonial-style house with perfectly manicured lawns. My father, William, was a successful investment banker who worked long hours and wore expensive suits. My mother, Eleanor, was the quintessential socialite who volunteered on charity boards and hosted dinner parties where appearances mattered above all else. I was their first child, and for 4 years I had their undivided attention. Then Ashley was born, and everything changed overnight. It was as if a switch had been flipped. Suddenly, I became background noise in my own home. The earliest memory I have of the favoritism was my 7th birthday. I had asked for a telescope because I was fascinated with astronomy. Instead, I received practical clothes and educational books while Ashley, who had turned 3 that month, received a custom playhouse for the backyard that cost thousands of dollars. When I asked why I couldn't have the telescope I wanted, my mother patted my head and said, "Ernestine, you're so practical. We thought you'd prefer something useful." This pattern continued throughout our childhood. Ashley received designer clothes from boutique children's stores, while I got sensible items from department stores. My parents attended every single one of Ashley's dance recitals, sitting front row with flowers and cameras, but routinely missed my academic competitions, even when I won national recognition for my science projects. Our family photos told the story clearly. Ashley was always front and center, often sitting on my father's lap or held in my mother's arms. I was positioned to the side, sometimes almost out of frame. When I look at these photos now, I can see the confusion in my young eyes, wondering what I had done wrong, why I wasn't worthy of the same love and attention. Despite the emotional neglect, I excelled academically. My teachers often commented on my exceptional abilities in science and mathematics. While Ashley struggled to maintain B's and C's, I consistently earned top marks. But at home, my report cards were given a cursory glance, while Ashley's mediocre grades were celebrated as if she had won a Nobel Prize. "Ashley tries so hard," my mother would say. "Not everyone is naturally bookish like you, Ernestine." The one person who recognized my potential was my grandfather Robert, my father's father. He was a retired physics professor who saw in me a kindred spirit. While my parents fawned over Ashley's grandfather, Robert would take me to museums, laboratories, and planetariums on weekends. We would spend hours discussing scientific theories and mathematical concepts. "You have a brilliant mind, Ernestine," he would tell me. "Never let anyone dim your light." When I was 12, Grandfather Robert announced that he had created trust funds for both Ashley and me. He explained that the money would be available when we turned 25, intended to help us pursue our dreams. I remember the way he looked directly at me when he said this, as if sending me a private message of support. That same night, I overheard my parents talking in the kitchen after they thought I had gone to bed. "Do you think Robert should have consulted us first?" my mother asked. "It's his money," my father replied. "Though I'm not sure Ernestine needs that much. She'll probably just spend it on more books or something practical. Ashley will need it more for her future." I stood frozen in the hallway, a glass of water in my hand, as they casually dismissed my future while prioritizing Ashley's. It was the first time I fully understood that the disparity in how they treated us was not my imagination or oversensitivity. It was real, and it was deliberate. That night I made a promise to myself. I would excel not to earn their approval, but for myself. I would build a life so successful that their favoritism would be revealed for the short-sightedness it was. Grandfather Robert had given me something far more valuable than money. He had given me validation and a belief in my own worth. As I lay in bed that night, clutching my science award medal that my parents hadn't bothered to attend, I decided that one day I would make them regret underestimating me. I just never imagined how dramatically that day would come, or how completely their world would unravel when it did. My teenage years brought even more stark contrasts between how my parents treated Ashley and me. By high school, I had developed a clear path forward. I joined every science club, entered competitions, and worked on independent research projects that caught the attention of university recruiters. In my junior year, I became the youngest student in my school's history to qualify for the National Science Olympiad. I worked for months on a groundbreaking research project about sustainable energy solutions, often staying up until 2 in the morning to perfect my presentation. When the day came to travel to Washington, D.C. for the competition, my parents announced they couldn't attend because Ashley had a minor role in a school play the same weekend. "You understand, don't you, Ernestine?" my mother said while adjusting Ashley's costume. "Ashley needs our support. You're so independent, you'll be fine on your own." I traveled to the competition alone, stayed in a hotel room by myself at 16, and won first place. The project even got written up in a prestigious science journal. My parents' response? A text message saying, "Congratulations," and a casual mention at dinner before quickly turning the conversation to Ashley's upcoming dance competition. Meanwhile, Ashley's achievements were minimal, but celebrated extravagantly. When she placed third in a local dance competition, my parents threw a party and invited the entire family. When she got a B- on a math test after nearly failing the previous one, they took her shopping as a reward for improvement. Ashley wasn't oblivious to the preferential treatment. In fact, she learned to manipulate it to her advantage. She routinely borrowed my belongings without asking, knowing our parents would defend her if I complained. "Don't be selfish, Ernestine. Sharing is caring," my mother would scold when I protested. More infuriating was Ashley's habit of taking credit for my ideas. Once for a family science night at school, she presented a project I had designed and built the previous year. My parents beamed with pride, never acknowledging that they had seen the exact same project when I created it originally. Ashley also developed a pattern of creating drama whenever I had important events. The night before my SAT exam, she manufactured a crisis about a fight with her friend, keeping the household awake until 3 in the morning. When I appeared bleary-eyed at breakfast, my father told me I should have gone to bed earlier, knowing I had an important test. Throughout these challenges, my relationship with Grandfather Robert remained my emotional anchor. His health began declining when I was 17, but he still made time for our scientific discussions and museum trips. He attended every competition and ceremony my parents missed, sitting proudly in the audience with his oxygen tank beside him. "I've been watching how they treat you," he told me during one of our private conversations. "It's not right, and it's not your fault. Remember that your trust fund is for your future, for that brilliant mind of yours to change the world." 3 months before my high school graduation, my parents hosted a family dinner. The main announcement, delivered with champagne and excitement, was that they would be funding Ashley's gap year in Europe, despite her mediocre grades and lack of direction. Later that same evening, when I mentioned my college ambitions, my father frowned. "MIT is awfully expensive, Ernestine. Have you considered state schools? We need to be practical about these things." Grandfather Robert, who had been quietly listening, put down his fork with a clank that silenced the table. "William," he said to my father, his voice stronger than it had been in months, "your daughter is a scientific prodigy who has earned a spot at one of the world's premier institutions. If you can fund a European vacation, you can certainly support her education." The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. 2 weeks later, Grandfather Robert asked me to visit him alone at his home. His health had deteriorated significantly, and we both knew he didn't have much time left. "Ernestine," he said, holding my hand with his frail one, "I need you to listen carefully. I've made arrangements for your future, because I don't trust your parents to treat you fairly." He handed me a folder containing copies of trust fund documents. "Keep these safe. I've appointed Jonathan Wallace, my attorney and friend, as trustee, not your parents. Promise me you'll pursue your dreams regardless of their support." I promised through tears, holding his hand until he fell asleep. It was the last real conversation we had. Grandfather Robert passed away 3 days later. His funeral was a blur of black clothes and platitudes. I stood beside my parents, and Ashley feeling more alone than I ever had despite being surrounded by family. As relatives offered condolences, they automatically turned to Ashley, first offering her comfort for losing her grandfather. while I, who had actually been close to him, stood by receiving secondary acknowledgments. After the funeral, I met Jonathan Wallace for the first time. He was a kind-faced man in his 60s who had been my grandfather's friend for decades. "Robert spoke of you often, and with great pride," he told me. "I want you to know that I take my responsibility as trustee very seriously. Your future was extremely important to him." I had no idea then how crucial this appointment would become, or how my parents would try to circumvent it once grandfather was no longer there to protect me. The autumn I left for MIT was both exhilarating and terrifying. I had received a partial scholarship, but the remaining costs were substantial. Despite my parents' wealth and my grandfather's trust fund, they displayed remarkable reluctance to contribute financially to my education. "We need to save for Ashley's future," my mother explained while ordering custom drapes for the living room renovation. "She'll need support for fashion school in a few years." "You've always been so independent, Ernestine," my father added. "Student loans would teach you valuable financial responsibility." Their attitude was particularly galling, given the trust fund grandfather Robert had established specifically for my education and future. When I mentioned this, my father's expression darkened. "Those funds are locked until you're 25, he said firmly. "It's not accessible now." Before leaving for Cambridge, I arranged a meeting with Jonathan Wallace to discuss my financial situation. His office was filled with law books and smelled of leather and paper. He reviewed my scholarship information and explained the trust fund details. "Your grandfather structured this very carefully," he explained. "The bulk of the trust becomes available when you turn 25, but there are provisions for educational expenses before that. I can arrange limited disbursements for your tuition and basic living expenses." He adjusted his glasses and looked at me directly. "Ernestine, I suggest you keep detailed records of all financial transactions related to your education. Your grandfather had concerns that your parents might interfere with his intentions." His careful wording confirmed my suspicions that grandfather Robert had been well aware of my parents' favoritism and had taken steps to protect me. Jonathan gave me his direct number and encouraged me to contact him if I had any concerns. MIT was transformative. For the first time, I was surrounded by people who valued intelligence and curiosity. My roommate Layla was a computer science major who stayed up late discussing technological ethics with me. We formed a study group with other STEM students who became the first real friends I'd ever had. I worked part-time in the university library to cover expenses beyond what my scholarship and trust disbursements provided. Despite the financial constraints and heavy workload, I thrived. My professors noted my exceptional abilities, particularly Professor Diana Chen, who headed the environmental engineering department. "Your approach to problem solving is unique, Ernestine," she told me after reviewing my research proposal on carbon capture technologies. "You see connections others miss." Under her mentorship, I developed innovative research that attracted attention from environmental organizations and tech companies. By my junior year, I was presenting at conferences and publishing papers, achievements that would have made grandfather Robert proud. During these years, my contact with my family became minimal. I returned home briefly for holidays, finding each visit more uncomfortable than the last. The contrast between my growing independence and Ashley's increasing dependence on our parents became impossible to ignore. During winter break of my junior year, I arrived home to find Ashley showing off a brand new luxury car in the driveway, a gift my father described as an early graduation present, despite the fact that Ashley had already changed her major 3 times and was nowhere near graduating. That same visit, I learned they had purchased an expensive apartment in Manhattan for Ashley's career networking in the fashion industry, though she had yet to complete a single internship or show any real commitment to the field. Meanwhile, they questioned why I needed new boots when mine had only a small hole in the sole. My senior year at MIT, I graduated summa cum laude with multiple job offers. The graduation ceremony was attended by Layla Professor Chen and, surprisingly, Jonathan Wallace, who traveled from Boston to Cambridge for the occasion. My parents and Ashley were notably absent, having texted that morning that they needed to help Ashley move into her new Manhattan apartment. Jonathan took me to dinner afterward, presenting me with a small box. Inside was a pendant that had belonged to my grandfather, a silver atom symbol on a simple chain. "He wanted you to have this when you graduated," Jonathan said. He knew you would make him proud. I wore that pendant to my first job interview the following week, securing a position at a prestigious environmental engineering firm back in Boston. As I signed the lease on my small but comfortable apartment, I felt a sense of accomplishment and vindication. I had succeeded despite my family's lack of emotional and financial support. With my career established, I began looking toward my 25th birthday and the full access to my trust fund it would bring. I had dreams beyond my current position, ideas for sustainable technology startups that could make real environmental impact. I researched business development, consulted with patent attorneys, and spoke with potential investors who were interested pending my seed funding. As my birthday approached, I made one more attempt to reconnect with my family, inviting my parents to dinner to share my business plans. They arrived late, my mother immediately commenting on my apartment's modest size and practical furnishings. When I excitedly outlined my startup concept, my father checked his watch repeatedly, while my mother scrolled through her phone. "That sounds like a nice hobby, Ernestine," my father said when I finished. "But real businesses require serious capital and connections." They quickly steered the conversation to Ashley's new venture as a lifestyle influencer, showing me her Instagram page filled with photos of exotic vacations and designer products. I learned that she had dropped out of fashion school entirely, but my parents had funded her fashion blog and social media presence, describing her as an entrepreneur. Throughout the evening, I attempted to bring up the trust fund several times, mentioning my upcoming birthday. Each time, my parents skillfully changed the subject, making vague comments about market fluctuations and suggesting I not count on that money in my planning. Their evasiveness triggered alarm bells. 2 days later, I received a disturbing call from Ashley, her voice slightly slurred as she boasted about her new Aspen condo. "Mom and Dad are the best," she gushed. "They said I needed a base for winter content creation. Isn't that amazing? You should come visit when you can get time off work." The casual mention of another major purchase further fueled my suspicions. I tried contacting Jonathan Wallace only to discover he had unexpectedly retired, replaced by a new attorney who never returned my calls. With growing anxiety, I marked my calendar for my 25th birthday, determined to visit the bank in person, to access my trust fund, and finally launch my future. My 25th birthday dawned bright and clear, a Tuesday in April that should have marked the beginning of my financial independence and entrepreneurial journey. I dressed carefully in my most professional outfit, a charcoal gray suit with the Adam pendant from my grandfather visible at my throat. I carried a portfolio containing all my trust documentation, business plans, and identification. Walking into the marble-floored bank lobby, I felt a mixture of excitement and trepidation. This money represented not just financial security, but the validation of my grandfather's belief in me and my potential. I approached the reception desk explaining I had an appointment regarding a trust fund that had matured. I was shown to a private office where Sophia Martinez, the new trust department manager, greeted me with a professional smile. She was a sharp-looking woman in her 40s with kind eyes behind stylish glasses. "Happy birthday, Ms. Williams," she said, gesturing for me to take a seat. "I understand you're here about the Robert Williams Trust established for your benefit." "Yes," I confirmed, sliding my documentation across the desk. "The trust matures today on my 25th birthday. I'd like to discuss accessing the funds." Sophia reviewed my identification and paperwork, her expression gradually shifting from professional neutrality to concern. She typed something into her computer, frowned at the screen, then typed again. After a moment, she picked up her phone and spoke quietly to someone about retrieving additional records. "Ms. Williams," she said after hanging up, "there seems to be a discrepancy in the account. Would you excuse me for a moment?" The 10 minutes she was gone felt like hours. My stomach knotted with growing dread. When she returned, she carried a thick folder and was accompanied by an older man she introduced as the bank's security officer, who sat quietly in the corner taking notes. "Ms. Williams," Sophia began carefully, "I'm afraid I have concerning news. According to our records, your trust fund has been almost completely depleted." The words hit me like a physical blow. "That's impossible," I whispered. "There should be $250,000 plus accumulated interest." Sophia turned her computer screen so I could see it. The current balance is $2,457.38. I stared at the screen, unable to process what I was seeing. There must be a mistake. I wish there was, Sophia replied, opening the folder. Our records show a series of large withdrawals beginning approximately 3 years ago. She slid a printout toward me. These withdrawals coincide with periods when a change in trustee documentation was filed. My hands trembled as I reviewed the statement. Large withdrawals, 50,000 here, 75,000 there, each one corresponding with what I now recognized as Ashley's major purchases. The condo in Aspen, the luxury car, the Manhattan apartment. Who authorized these withdrawals? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Sophia hesitated before responding. The withdrawals were authorized by William and Eleanor Williams, listed as acting trustees following a change in the trust administration 3 years ago. The room seemed to spin around me. I gripped the edge of the desk, nauseated and shaking. Sophia quickly poured me a glass of water and suggested we move to a more private conference room where I could collect myself. Once seated in the quieter space, Sophia gently asked if I was aware of the trustee change. I shook my head, explaining that Jonathan Wallace, my grandfather's friend and attorney, had been appointed as trustee, not my parents. May I see the documentation authorizing the change? I asked. Sophia produced several legal forms. The signatures looked strange, slightly different from how I remembered Jonathan's handwriting. More disturbingly, there was what appeared to be my signature on one of the forms allegedly consenting to the trustee change, dated during my junior year of college, when I had been fully occupied with finals, and definitely had not signed any such document. I never signed this, I said firmly. And I find it hard to believe Jonathan Wallace would retire without informing me, given his close relationship with my grandfather. Sophia exchanged glances with the security officer, who made additional notes. Ms. Williams, given what you're telling me, there may be grounds to investigate potential fraud here. The bank takes these matters very seriously. She explained the next steps. They would launch an internal investigation attempt to contact Jonathan Wallace and review all documentation related to the trust. She recommended I consult an attorney specializing in financial fraud and offered to provide referrals. I left the bank in a daze, my business plans in shambles and my trust in my family completely shattered. Sitting in my car in the parking lot, I cycled through shock, grief, and finally rage. Years of favoritism and emotional neglect had culminated in this ultimate betrayal. They had stolen my future, my grandfather's legacy to fund Ashley's frivolous lifestyle. I drove directly to my parents' house, rehearsing what I would say, how I would confront them. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. Flashbacks of childhood disappointments, teenage slights and recent dismissals flashed through my mind. My heart raced and sweat dampened my collar despite the car's air conditioning. When I arrived, both my parents' cars were in the driveway. Good. I wanted to face them both. I marched up to the front door and rang the bell, the portfolio of bank statements clutched in my hand like evidence at a trial. My mother answered, surprise registering on her perfectly made-up face. Ernestine, we weren't expecting you. Is everything all right? No, everything is not all right, I said, pushing past her into the foyer. Where's Dad? We need to talk, now. My father emerged from his home office, annoyed at the interruption. Ernestine, what's the meaning of this? We're rather busy today. I just came from the bank, I said, my voice shaking with anger. My trust fund is empty. $250,000 gone. Care to explain? Their reactions told me everything. No shock, no confusion. Just a momentary exchange of glances, before my father's face settled into a defensive scowl, and my mother's into a placating smile. Now, Ernestine, my mother began, there's no need for dramatics. Dramatics, I echoed, slapping the bank statements onto the entryway table. You stole my money. Money grandfather left specifically for me. My father picked up the statements, glancing at them without surprise. We didn't steal anything. As your parents, we made financial decisions in the family's best interest. You mean in Ashley's best interest? I countered. The withdrawals perfectly match her condo, her car, her apartment. You emptied my trust fund to spoil her. Your sister needed the money more than you did, my mother said, as if explaining something to a child. You've always been so self-sufficient with your scholarships and job. Ashley is trying to establish herself in a competitive industry. By posting pictures of herself in expensive clothes, that's not an industry, that's a hobby. You're subsidizing with stolen money. My father's face hardened. That's enough. The trust was always meant to support both our children as needed. Ashley needed it now. That's a lie, I said, my voice dangerously quiet. Grandfather established separate trusts for each of us. You changed the trustee designation, possibly forged documents, and systematically drained my account. You're being ridiculous, my father scoffed. You've always been jealous of your sister, always competing for attention. The familiar dismissal of my feelings nearly broke me, but I stood my ground. The bank is investigating this as potential fraud. They're contacting Jonathan Wallace. For the first time, a flicker of concern crossed my father's face. Before he could respond, the front door opened and Ashley breezed in, shopping bags on her arm and new diamond studs glittering in her ears. "Oh, hi, Ernestine," she said casually. "What are you doing here? Aren't you usually working all the time?" Looking at her designer clothes and carefree expression, knowing they had been purchased with my stolen future, something broke inside me. They emptied my trust fund to buy you things, Ashley. Grandfather's money that was meant for my future. Ashley looked momentarily confused, then shrugged. Well, I'm sure Mom and Dad know what they're doing. They always say family resources should go where they're needed most. And that's always been you, hasn't it? I said bitterly. My father stepped between us. Ernestine, you've always been so independent. You don't need handouts. Your sister is building a brand, establishing connections in high society. That requires investment. The smugness in his tone, the absolute certainty that I would accept this explanation as I had accepted all the other injustices over the years, infuriated me. This isn't over, I said. I'm not staying quiet this time. My mother laughed lightly. Darling, what exactly do you think you're going to do? Take your own family to court? Create a public scandal? You wouldn't. Their confidence that I would ultimately back down that family loyalty, would override my sense of justice, was the final insult. I gathered my documentation and walked to the door. You've never really seen me, I said quietly. You've never understood what I'm capable of. That's about to change. I left them standing in their perfect foyer, surrounded by luxury purchased with stolen dreams, their faces still wearing expressions of smug certainty that I would ultimately do nothing. They had underestimated me for the last time. The weekend after discovering my parents' betrayal was a blur of emotions. I cycled through anger so intense it left me shaking grief that brought me to my knees, and a sense of betrayal so profound it felt like a physical wound. I barely ate or slept, alternating between periods of numb shock and overwhelming rage. Sunday evening, my phone rang with a call from Layla, my college roommate who had remained a close friend. Something in my voice must have alerted her that something was wrong, and before I knew it, I was pouring out the whole story. Those absolute monsters, she said when I finished. Ernestine, you have to fight this. This isn't just unfair treatment, this is actual theft. Another call came from Professor Chen, who had become a mentor and friend over the years. Her advice was measured but firm. Document everything, she said, and get proper legal representation immediately. I have a colleague whose sister specializes in financial crimes. Let me connect you. Monday morning, I took a personal day from work and met with Sarah Goldstein, the attorney Professor Chen had recommended. Her office was in a converted brownstone in downtown Boston, warm and professional without being intimidating. Sarah herself was a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s with a no-nonsense manner that immediately put me at ease. I presented her with all my documentation. The original trust paperwork, the suspicious trustee change forms the bank statements showing the pattern of withdrawals, and my notes about Ashley's acquisitions that coincided with the missing funds. Sarah reviewed everything carefully, occasionally asking clarifying questions. When she finished, she removed her reading glasses and looked at me directly. Ms. Williams, based on what I'm seeing here, you have a strong case for both civil recovery and potentially criminal charges of fraud and embezzlement. The trustee change documentation is particularly troubling, as is what appears to be a forged signature. What's our first step? I asked, relieved to have a plan of action. First, we need to locate Jonathan Wallace and verify whether he actually retired. Then we'll file for an emergency injunction to prevent any further withdrawals from what remains of the trust. Simultaneously, we'll begin the process of civil recovery against your parents. Over the next few days, Sarah's team began their investigation, uncovering disturbing information. Jonathan Wallace had never actually retired, but had been told by my parents that I no longer required his services as trustee. They had apparently presented him with documentation, which he now suspected was falsified, indicating I had appointed my parents to manage my financial affairs. Further investigation revealed a pattern of misrepresentation to bank officials, with my parents presenting themselves as acting on my behalf with my full knowledge and consent. The deeper we dug, the more evident the deliberate fraud became. Despite the mounting evidence, I struggled with the decision to take legal action against my own family. Society places enormous pressure on maintaining family relationships, particularly between parents and children. Part of me still yearned for their love and recognition, still hoped for some reasonable explanation that could salvage our relationship. Ernestine, Sarah said during one of our meetings, when I expressed these doubts, what your parents did wasn't a misunderstanding or a well-intentioned mistake. This was calculated systematic theft of your inheritance. Sometimes standing up for yourself is the most important thing you can do, even when it's painful. With her guidance, I filed the initial legal paperwork and a police report detailing the financial crimes. The response from my parents was swift and aggressive. My father left threatening voicemails warning me about destroying the family. My mother called relatives who then contacted me, urging me to drop the ridiculous vendetta against my loving parents who had always provided for me. The most surprising tactic was their attempt to paint me as mentally unstable and ungrateful. My aunt called concern in her voice, saying my parents had told her I was having some kind of breakdown due to work stress and had developed paranoid delusions about my family. "They've always worried about your intensity, dear," she said. "Always so serious, so focused on achievement. Perhaps you should see someone." I nearly laughed at the absurdity of it. They had stolen $250,000 from me, and I was the one who needed help. Just as I was beginning to feel overwhelmed by the family pressure, I received an unexpected call from someone I had never met, Mark Tanner Ashley's ex-boyfriend. "You don't know me," he began awkwardly, "but I dated your sister for about 6 months last year. I saw a copy of the legal notice at your parents' house when I was picking up some things I'd left there. I think there are some things you should know." We met at a coffee shop where Mark revealed that my parents had been living far beyond their means for years. My father's investment firm had suffered significant losses during the economic downturn, and rather than scaling back their lifestyle, they had maintained appearances by taking on increasing debt. "Ashley told me once when she was drunk that your parents had been using both your trust funds to cover their financial holes," Mark explained. "She thought it was funny that they were using your book money to pay for her lifestyle, while telling everyone what a financial genius your dad was." Mark also revealed that my mother had a shopping addiction that had spiraled out of control with secret credit cards and hidden purchases. The perfect family image they projected was a carefully maintained facade, hiding financial mismanagement and ethical bankruptcy. Just as we were processing this new information, my phone rang with a call from Sophia Martinez at the bank. Her voice had an urgency that made me step outside to take the call. "Ms. Williams, I need you to come to the bank as soon as possible," she said. "We've discovered additional documentation in our archives that changes everything. I can't discuss the details over the phone, but you'll want to see this immediately." I thanked Mark for his information and drove directly to the bank, my mind racing with possibilities. Had they found evidence exonerating my parents, or something that made the situation even worse? As I walked into the bank, I had no idea that what Sophia was about to tell me would not only change the trajectory of my case, but would wipe the smug smiles off my parents' faces and replace them with pure panic. Sophia Martinez met me in the bank lobby, her professional demeanor barely containing what appeared to be excitement. She escorted me not to her office, but to a large conference room where several people were waiting, including the bank's head of security and a distinguished older man I didn't recognize. "Ms. Williams," Sophia began once we were seated, "this is Thomas Reynolds, head of our trust department. We've made a significant discovery regarding your grandfather's estate planning." Thomas nodded gravely. Ms. Williams, while investigating the irregularities in your primary trust, our team uncovered documentation regarding a secondary trust established by Robert Williams in your name. My confusion must have shown on my face because Sophia quickly continued. It appears your grandfather suspected that your parents might attempt to access your original trust fund. As a precaution, he established a completely separate account with double the original amount, $500,000 plus accumulated interest over the past 7 years. I stared at them in disbelief. A second trust. My grandfather set up a secret backup trust. Thomas slid a folder across the table. Inside were legal documents with my grandfather's distinctive signature. Not exactly secret, but certainly well protected. This trust was established with extraordinarily strict legal stipulations, making it completely untouchable by anyone but you, and only accessible on your 25th birthday, or upon evidence that the primary trust had been compromised. As I reviewed the documentation, I felt a wave of emotion. Even from beyond the grave, Grandfather Robert had been protecting me, anticipating the very betrayal that had occurred. The timing of your visit last week triggered an automatic review, Sophia explained. When you reported the primary trust had been depleted, our system flagged the secondary trust for activation. We had to verify all the conditions had been met before informing you. How much? I asked, my voice barely audible. Thomas smiled for the first time. The secondary trust currently holds $587,422.17, including accumulated interest. And Ms. Williams, this account has triple verification protocols. Your parents cannot access it under any circumstances. I covered my mouth with my hand, tears springing to my eyes. This wasn't just money. It was vindication. My grandfather had known. He had seen the favoritism, anticipated my parents' betrayal, and taken steps to ensure my future regardless. There's more, Sophia said, her expression turning serious. The activation of this secondary trust automatically triggered a fraud investigation into the primary trust. Your parents have been sent formal notice from our legal department regarding the findings, including the requirement to repay all misappropriated funds and notification of potential criminal charges. When? I asked. The notices were delivered by courier this morning, Thomas replied. I imagine they've received them by now. As if on cue, my phone began vibrating with incoming calls from both my parents. I silenced it without answering. For once, they could wait. I had financial planning to do. After discussing the details of accessing my new trust and setting up appropriate accounts, I thanked the bank officials and walked to my car feeling lighter than I had in years. Instead of going home, I drove to a quiet park overlooking the harbor, needing time to process everything that had happened. My phone continued to light up with calls and increasingly desperate text messages from my parents. Ernestine, call us immediately. This is all a misunderstanding. We need to talk as a family. Please don't do anything rash. After giving myself an hour of peaceful reflection, I finally decided to face them. Not over the phone, but in person. I wanted to see their faces when they realized they had lost control of the situation of me. I drove to their house, noticing more cars than usual in the driveway. As I approached the front door, I could hear raised voices inside. I rang the doorbell, and the house immediately fell silent. My father opened the door, his face ashen. Behind him, I could see my mother sitting on the sofa, eyes red from crying. Several other family members gathered around looking concerned, and Ashley standing by the fireplace, arms crossed defensively. Ernestine, my father said, his usual commanding tone replaced with something approaching desperation. Come in, we need to talk. I entered, but remained standing near the door, maintaining physical distance that symbolized my emotional separation from them. I assume you received the bank's notice. This is all a terrible mistake, my mother said, rushing over. Your father and I were only managing the money for your benefit. By spending it on Ashley's condo, her car, her apartment, I asked calmly. That doesn't sound like managing it for my benefit. We're family, my father interjected. Family resources are shared. That wasn't your decision to make? I replied. Grandfather left that money specifically for me, and you took it. Ashley stepped forward for once, looking uncertain. I didn't know the money for my things came from your trust fund. They told me it was family money. I wasn't sure whether to believe her. but her confusion seemed genuine. Well, now you know. An uncle I rarely saw spoke up from the corner. Ernestine, surely we can resolve this within the family. The legal notices mention fraud investigations, criminal charges. You don't want to put your parents through that, do you? I turned to him with newfound confidence. What I wanted was for my parents to love me as much as they love Ashley. What I wanted was for them to support my dreams the way they supported hers. What I wanted was for them to respect my grandfather's wishes and my inheritance. They chose not to do any of those things. Now they can face the consequences of those choices. My father's face flushed with anger, but it quickly gave way to fear, an expression I'd never seen on him before. What do you want from us? Ernestine, money. An apology. Tell us what will make this go away. It's not about what I want now, I said. It's about what's right. You stole from me. You betrayed my trust in grandfathers. You lied, forged documents, and committed fraud. This isn't going away. My mother began crying dramatically. You would send your own parents to jail over money after everything we've done for you. I almost laughed at the absurdity of her question. What exactly have you done for me? Mother ignored my achievements, forgotten my birthdays, dismissed my dreams, stolen my inheritance. The room fell silent. For perhaps the first time in my life, I had rendered my mother speechless. The bank has also informed me about grandfather's secondary trust. I continued, watching their faces carefully. He anticipated that you might try to take the first one, so he created a backup, with twice the amount, plus interest. The color drained from my father's face. My mother gasped audibly. Ashley's mouth fell open in shock. You have a choice, I said. You can fight this legally, drain your resources on attorneys, risk criminal prosecution, and public humiliation. Or you can sell your luxury assets, repay every penny you took from my trust with interest, and we can discuss the possibility of rebuilding some kind of relationship moving forward. I turned to leave, then paused at the door. You have 48 hours to decide. My attorney will be in touch. As I walked to my car, I heard the argument erupt behind me, blame being thrown in all directions. For the first time in my life, their drama wasn't my concern. I had a future to plan, a business to launch, and a life to build on my own terms. The months following the confrontation with my family brought dramatic changes for all of us. My parents, facing the combined pressure of legal proceedings, financial investigation, and family scrutiny, chose the path of settlement rather than prolonged court battles. They were forced to sell their vacation home in the Hamptons, my father's prized vintage car collection, and my mother's extensive jewelry to repay the misappropriated funds. My father's professional reputation suffered, as whispers of the financial impropriety spread through Boston's close-knit investment community. They downsized from their sprawling colonial to a modest townhouse, a visible symbol of their diminished circumstances. The most surprising development came from Ashley. Initially, she reacted with anger when she learned she would need to sell the Aspen condo and return the car purchased with my trust fund money. "This is so unfair," she had shouted during a tense family meeting with the attorneys present. "I didn't know where the money came from. Why am I being punished?" You're not being punished, I explained calmly. You're returning property that was purchased with stolen funds. There's a difference. As the reality of the situation sank in, something shifted in Ashley. Perhaps it was seeing our parents' facade of perfection and financial success crumble, or perhaps it was finally facing consequences for the first time in her life. Whatever the cause, she approached me privately after the meeting. I need to talk to you, she said, her usual confidence absent. Not here. Maybe coffee sometime. We met at a neutral cafe the following week. Ashley looked different, stripped of her designer clothes and excessive jewelry, wearing simple jeans and a sweater, her face free of the heavy makeup she typically wore. I've been seeing a therapist, she began awkwardly. She's helping me understand some things about our family dynamic. I never realized. I knew Mom and Dad favored me, but I thought that was normal. I didn't see how it hurt you. I sipped my coffee, unsure how to respond. A lifetime of favoritism couldn't be erased with one therapy-inspired insight. I benefited from their treatment of you, she continued when I didn't speak. And while I didn't know they were stealing your money, I did know they gave me everything and questioned your every request. I never stood up for you. I'm sorry for that." Her apology seemed sincere, but years of manipulation had made me cautious. "What do you want, Ashley?" She looked down at her hands. "A chance to make amends, I guess, and some advice. I need to find a real job, figure out who I am without all the handouts. I don't even know where to start." It was the first honest conversation we'd ever had. While I wasn't ready to forgive completely, I recognized this could be the beginning of a new type of relationship between us. I gave her some practical suggestions about job applications and skills assessment, and we agreed to meet again the following month. Meanwhile, I used my recovered and newly accessed funds to launch Williams Sustainable Technologies, focusing on the carbon capture innovation I had been developing for years. I rented modest office space, hired a small team of brilliant engineers I had connected with through Professor Chen, and began the exciting work of bringing my environmental solutions to market. The early months were challenging, but exhilarating. I worked long hours, faced numerous technical setbacks, and navigated the complex world of business regulations and investor relationships. But unlike my previous struggles, these challenges felt purposeful and rewarding. 6 months after launching, we secured our first major contract with an international environmental organization looking to implement our technology in regions with heavy industrial pollution. The press release announcing the partnership generated unexpected media attention, not just for the innovative technology, but for the story behind it. A journalist researching the company discovered the legal proceedings involving my parents and contacted me for comment. Rather than hiding from the story, I chose to address it directly, speaking about the importance of financial literacy and protection for young adults. The resulting article portrayed me as a resilient innovator who had overcome personal betrayal to create technology that could help save the environment. The publicity brought more attention to our company and, ironically, to my parents' actions. Several former clients of my father's came forward with concerns about his financial management, leading to a formal investigation by regulatory authorities. As my company grew, I received an unexpected application for our marketing department, Ashley. Her cover letter was honest about her lack of traditional experience, but highlighted her knowledge of social media and content creation. After much consideration and a rigorous interview process with my management team, we decided to give her a chance in an entry-level position. "I want to earn this," she told me on her first day. "No special treatment." "Trust me," I replied with a small smile. "That won't be a problem." To her credit, Ashley worked hard, arriving early, and staying late learning the industry from the ground up, and contributing valuable insights about reaching younger demographics. Our relationship remained professional at work, but we began occasionally meeting for Sunday brunches, slowly building a sibling relationship based on mutual respect rather than competition. My parents' attempts at reconciliation were more complicated. Their initial apologies focused primarily on their own suffering, the humiliation of downsizing, and the pain of social ostracism. "We've lost everything because of this situation," my mother lamented during an uncomfortable dinner 3 months after the settlement. "You lost everything because you stole from your daughter," I corrected her. "Let's be clear about cause and effect here." Over time, and reportedly with the help of therapy, their perspective began to shift. My father in particular seemed to develop genuine remorse. "I convinced myself we were just redistributing family resources," he admitted during a later conversation. "But the truth is, I never valued your dreams the way I valued Ashley's. I never saw your potential the way your grandfather did. That was my failure, not yours." I established firm boundaries with them, allowing limited contact and maintaining emotional distance. Trust, once broken so completely, could only be rebuilt slowly, if at all. I made it clear that any future relationship would depend on their continued accountability and respect for my autonomy. 1 year after the confrontation at the bank, my life had transformed completely. Williams Sustainable Technologies had grown to a team of 20 employees, including Ashley, who had earned a promotion to marketing coordinator based on her performance. Our carbon capture technology was being implemented in 3 countries, with negotiations underway for expansion to several more. I had moved to a comfortable but not ostentatious apartment with a stunning view of the harbor where I could watch the sunrise each morning. More importantly, I had developed relationships outside of my dysfunctional family, including a promising connection with Daniel, an environmental lawyer I had met through industry events. In honor of my grandfather's legacy, I established the Robert Williams Science Scholarship for young women from challenging family backgrounds, providing not just financial support, but mentorship and internship opportunities at my company. My parents continued their therapy and financial counseling, working to rebuild their lives on a more honest foundation. My father found work at a smaller firm, his position and salary much reduced from his previous status. My mother volunteered at a community center, discovering a genuine interest in helping others rather than just appearing to do so. As I reflect on the journey from betrayal to rebuilding, I recognize that the theft of my trust fund, while painful, ultimately freed me from seeking validation from people incapable of providing it. In standing up for myself, I discovered a strength I hadn't known I possessed, and created a life based on my values rather than reactions to family dysfunction. The money was never really about the money. It was about respect, recognition, and the right to determine my own future. In fighting for those principles, I found something far more valuable than the trust fund itself. I found my voice and the courage to use it. I've learned that forgiveness doesn't always mean reconciliation, that boundaries are forms of self-respect, and that sometimes the family you build is more important than the family you're born into. Most importantly, I've learned that standing up for yourself isn't selfish. It's necessary, especially when it's difficult. What about you? Have you ever had to stand up to family who underestimated you? What boundaries have you had to set with loved ones who couldn't see your worth? Share your stories in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss another story of justice served. Thank you for listening to my journey. And remember, sometimes the people who should believe in you the most are the ones who see you the least. But that doesn't diminish your light or your right to shine. What about you? Have you ever had to stand up to family who underestimated you? What boundaries have you had to set with loved ones who couldn't see your worth? Share your stories in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss another story of justice served. Thank you for listening to my journey. And remember, sometimes the people who should believe in you the most are the ones who see you the least. But that doesn't diminish your light or your right to shine.